The Waldorf Essentials Thinking, Feeling, Willing program is your roadmap to success in your Waldorf homeschool journey. Gain the confidence you need, be the teacher your child wants, and transform your homeschool experience. What's included in the Thinking, Feeling, Willing program? Rhythm, inner work, temperament, the Waldorf curriculum, learning and strengthening your skills in music, circle time, form drawing, handwork, painting, drawing, modeling, festivals, reading, writing, spelling, eurythmy, creating your own co-op, schooling several children, writing your own curriculum, and our masterclass archive.
Welcome to our Class 4 conversation, and I am so excited to have my good friend Daniela, who teaches for us over at Seasons of 7, and I'm just really excited for her to be here. We're going to talk about Class 4, and we're gonna go over some like overview, simple things, and then in our Patreon section, we're going to go over some juicier, deeper things. And I'm just really excited. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So tell us about you, Daniela.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting me and for the opportunity to speak here and to share this with everyone. You heard my name is Daniela, and I like to say that my path to teaching in Waldorf education model has been like long and beautiful and convoluted across many mountains over many seas. And that really is the beauty of it. And I love hearing stories from everybody else of how they come to Waldorf education.
Right.
You know, as I look back here, I am now in Seasons of 7 teaching and working with amazing faculty and families and students who inspire me every day. To get here, I homeschooled my own son for a large part of his school journey. I taught at our local Waldorf school here for a number of years, since 2011, all up until, the years are running together now.
Right.
Up until it was my son's time to go to high school. Then we moved for him to do some high school years in a Waldorf school. Then pandemic came, then we came back, then he homeschooled for 11th and 12th grade. So it's been this weaving, this beautiful tapestry of working as a homeschooling parent and teacher, as a class teacher at the local Waldorf school, as a parent and teacher, you know, at the same time,
Right.
having my son attend the Waldorf school I was teaching at, and then still homeschooling and weaving that together and alternating through the years. It's been amazing. The biggest blessing is that everything that led up to me discovering Waldorf education came together. And this is what I really love to share when I introduce myself, is that not that much about, you know, I did go to school, of course, and, you know, I have my background, my doctorate degree is in traditional naturopathy, and I used to practice and teach holistic lifestyle living. And I still do offer those sessions for some of my old students and old clients. But just all of that together, the life itself kind of bloomed and ignited a new flame when I stepped into a Waldorf classroom, when our local Waldorf school needed a helping hand. And I stepped in and I knew I was supposed to be there. And out of those life experiences to then inspire students to see that everything is related in life. We are human when we live life to that fullest degree. And that I think is more important than my degrees, which you can read on Seasons of 7 website.
Right, absolutely. No, but you know, I agree so much. I think what's so beautiful is that there isn't one part of the Waldorf curriculum that is just like, oh, well, we don't know why we do this. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else. Every single piece is intertwined. It is woven together. It, you know, goes horizontally and vertically, all of those pieces. And when you can look at it as this beautiful whole, then you can really start to understand the parts and the pieces that go in there. And, you know, Steiner talked about the whole apart stuff all the time. And so I love to, when a parent says, well, why this? And I go, all right, well, let's take a step back and let's look at the bigger picture. What we're doing here has, like, it's not just about where they are right now, but as they grow, they're gonna look at it again in a more in-depth way. And it will it paves the way for them and paves the space for them to, really be flexible thinkers and to really ignite their minds in honestly in ways that I've never seen anywhere else. And, I've been around the block. I've studied a lot of different methods. And I, especially in my early years, like with my own children, I couldn't find anything. And people would say, "Oh, try Thomas Jefferson, try Charlotte Mason," and I would go, "Okay, but wait, there's so much depth in Steiner. All that stuff is great for people, some people, but if you want the whole thing, it's here. Like all of it is here." And so I actually kind of like it when, and maybe you do too. Maybe I'm just weird, but I like it when people are like, "There's no way they can get a child ready for college." And I go, "Oh, would you like to have a conversation? Let's sit down and chat for a little bit." Because I think that that's really, and not just college, but life. It's such a beautiful space. Such a beautiful space.
And I
Okay.
think what you
Go
just
ahead.
said, not just college, but life,
Life.
and acknowledging that college is not the only path, I
Absolutely.
I think that is so important. And I sit here as a parent, and my son did all of his college applications on his own and earned his scholarships. He is set for his path in college, but not because I kept saying you need to be ready for college.
Right. I
You know,
agree.
but because
Yeah.
you need to be ready for life. And when you
Couldn't agree
know
more.
what you want to accomplish, and if college is part of that path, then
Right.
you gotta do it.
I couldn't agree more because I do think, I turned 50 this year. I don't know how old you are, but like in this path for the last, I would say easily for the last 50 to 70 years, it's like college, 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 college. That's all people want to talk about. Where you went to school, what you studied, and all of that. And we've forgotten that there are so many other things to do. And, out of my 5 kids, the 3 that are adults, they're not doing what what we thought they were going to do. They're doing what they want to do. I mean, I have a child that's a welder that has some welding school behind him, but then he left because he was doing better work than the teachers that were teaching him. So I think it's important to teach our children how to carve their own path. And it doesn't matter if it's college, if it's trade, if it's becoming an entrepreneur. There are so many different paths to, a beautiful life. And I think too, something that's really interesting that I wish somebody had told me when I was 25, you could do something for 5 years and then decide to do something else. And it's okay.
Yes.
It's
And I
okay.
think the more we can become aware of that, it'll be better for us. I mean, we have so much ahead of us, and what we're doing now, I
Right?
never would think in early 2000s training to be a Waldorf teacher that I could be a Waldorf teacher in this way.
I
This
know.
was like beyond any
I agree.
So
I know. I mean, Melanie and I actually talk about that a lot. She's over, for those of you who don't know, she's our director over at Seasons of Seven. And we've been friends for a while, but my gosh, if you had told both of us like 5, 6 years ago that this is what we'd be doing, we would laugh and say there's no way that's happening. It's just so beautiful because we absolutely put that impulse out there. It's just that once you put the impulse out there, you sure can't pick how it comes. But sometimes it comes the most beautiful way that you would have never guessed. And it just has this lovely way of unfolding. So I agree. I studied law. Studied law, and yeah, I could care less about that path right now. Care less. I have a couple of sons that I'm like, maybe you ought to look at law because you like to argue a lot. Maybe you ought to look at law. Oh, mom. But anyway, I think it's just such a fun path. And I do think that one of the best things homeschool parents can do is not box themselves in. I had somebody, we'll get to class 4 in a moment, but I had somebody yesterday I had posted something on Instagram about, our school year. And somebody said, "Well, how are you getting your 180 days in?" I said, "You need to be a homeschooler longer because just try to stop your kids from learning on a Saturday. Just try. Or on a holiday. Like there is no way you're going to have trouble getting those learning moments in because children are always learning. They're always opening up to new capacities. So we really just get to be there to support it and have a good time with it instead of stressing so much about the other stuff.
Yeah, and I think just learning to recognize those learning experiences and log them in your days if you need to count them.
Right. Absolutely. Log it if you need to, but my goodness.
365 instead of
Right.
180.
Right. Well, if I counted, I know we'd be way over,
Yeah.
over. So
Yeah.
I do think it's that space of realizing that you get to be in charge of the education, like somebody else, even if you have to report to some government entity, which many of us do, it doesn't mean you don't get to be in charge of your education. Often we convince ourselves, we tell ourselves a story about that. And I'm all for like shattering those stories and writing new ones because it's a beautiful space to be. So,
yes,
all right.
homeschooling gives tremendous freedom and responsibility. And I think, you know, however you decide you're homeschooling, that path is the path of that freedom of responsibility.
Oh,
and not
absolutely.
only I find is it that balance that is important for homeschooling path, but it's a life skill that just by doing that we're modeling for our children, and they grow up with learning that balance as well. Which
I agree 100%. It is that it's like this twin value of freedom and responsibility, right? All right, let's talk about grade 4. You ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
So
grade 4 is amazing.
it is one of my, you know, I think every year is my favorite. I'm in it and I'm like, oh, this is my favorite. But now we're closing up grade 5 with my daughter. And I'm like, dang it, I'm going to miss botany after we're done here. So tell me, who is ready for class 4?
Yes, class 4. What do we know about a child when they're ready for class 4? We look at them and we see that they look a little different than they did when they crossed the rainbow bridge. You know, when they crossed the rainbow bridge in that first and second grade, their face started to change. You see the change in their face, but they're now well into their 9-year change. Like, we call this crossing of the Rubicon a 9-year change, but it's a process. It's a process that lasts. It's not like this happens now. And grade 4 is so intertwined with that process. Their trunk grows in length. So physically, we see a longer trunk on the child. And towards the end of grade 4, we're going to see tremendous growth spurts starting, especially girls' bodies are going to stretch out faster. And
some of them are starting their cycles by this time.
Yes. So all of these things are changing. We see bodies changing, and we know then that this child is there. But we are conditioned to see outside. We need to also feel. So how do we feel the child is ready for class 4? It is not about simply can they read, can they do times tables. It's really not about that. Those things they may be able to do, they hopefully are all able to do. But if they're not, they have time to learn them. They will have time to practice. And that's responsibility part.
No, agreed. You know, I found class 4 to be this incredible time of like consolidating. I felt like we had done, you know, you've got this first and second grade space, and then third grade is a little bit more, but in fourth grade, I felt like this was the time where I really focused on, all right, let's make sure that handwriting is in a better place. Let's make sure that your main lesson work is not just done, but done beautifully. Like we're going to this new space of, we've been doing that, but now I'm going to expect a little bit more.
Yeah. And then the changes that happen, you know, the body changes. You see the longer trunk, you see towards the end of class 4, you see longer limbs, but you see a different pose. You know, in grade 3, they looked up at you, at the teacher, at the coach, at the dance teacher, at their music. They looked up and they followed like this. Or if they pushed back, they still pushed back in this unidirectional kind of way. Now in grade 4, we are looking out, we're looking around, and they're criticizing us. They will look at mom and dad, and I remember my son look at me in the morning and say, "Are you gonna wear that today?" I would and things like that. You know?
No, my daughter even asked me this morning, she goes, "Is that a new shirt?" I said, yeah. Like it wasn't like, "Oh, I really like your new shirt." It was, "Is that a new shirt?" Yes.
And Another important thing is restlessness. We see the body starting to feel restless. And we have to remember that even though we want to step up this academic accomplishment, we need the writing to be in place. We
Right.
need the math. We need those facts. Yes, working on all of that, but keep moving,
I agree.
that is so important. If you notice that your child is wriggling in the chair, that means they've been in that chair for too long.
Too long. You need to get,
If they're saying, oh, my hand hurts, I can't write these 5 sentences, that means they've been sitting for too long. That we need to keep moving. And homeschooling opens up beautifully to ability to do that, to meet the child individually.
I
And
agree.
every child is going to be different in a different place. And in September, half the class may be very restless, but the other half may still be following me and their parent like this.
Right.
And in homeschooling, you're so flexible, you're free to meet the child where they are. I think that is so important, that restlessness needs to be seen and recognized. And we need to remember the limbs are like, they're so important. And when we talk about curriculum, we'll talk more about the limbs and how important they are. And this is the year when they need to keep moving. They need to keep doing.
I think about my sons in this time. And of course, my sons were always busy, but there was something, because it is that restless place, there's something extra. There was it's that Loki energy that is extra busyness. And as homeschool parents, there is zero reason for you to not move your bodies, get out, go on those walks. I remember times if they were fighting, I'd say, okay, we lived in a really safe neighborhood. You can go for a run. I'll see you when you come back. Making sure that because that's what happens. At least that's what I have experienced, that when it's built up and it's like this and they're like this and they're not feeling good in their body, then they're going to fight. If you've got more than one child at home, they're going to fight. And if you've only got one, they're going to fight you. So you have to find those ways to like almost just shake it off and just get all of it out. And I do think that's such an important space for sure. For sure.
Yes. Yes. And then that sense of separateness. So you just said, go for a run and come back. There is a soul feeling. There's an emotion that arises. I'm going outside on my own.
Right.
And it doesn't matter that to us as adults, it seems like, okay, it's the run around my neighborhood is safe. For them, that doesn't feel like that. But then they also want that. They seek that out. I remember my son deciding that he's going to leave and live on his own. What that meant is he took the tent from our garage and went into the backyard and set it up. Then it got too hot and he packed it up, said, I'm ready to come back home. So the restlessness is both physical and emotional, and seeing that really, and when we talk about curriculum, we're going to see how the curriculum really meets that, how we are meeting it without preaching, without lecture.
Absolutely. We didn't. My daughter read 2 books during that 4th grade year that I think really touched her. My Side of the Mountain, which is about a boy who runs away and gets a bird. And oh my gosh, Where the Red Fern Grows. Emotionally, it was such a beautiful space, but you could see the emotions moving in her body. She had gotten her cycle in class 4. It was this space that she really needed the emotional piece. Plus, she's pretty choleric, so I needed to help her with some empathy. But it was a space of like this, just a beautiful, sad, but also to be able to see the other side. I remember when she brought me The Red Fern Grows. She's just, and we also have a bloodhound, so that didn't help any. Just bawling. I can't finish. It was the last chapter. I said, well, let's read it together. And I'm crying. She's crying. The dog's in our lap. But it was such this beautiful, you could almost feel the movement of the emotion in there. And then we went for a walk and it was great. It was fine. It had moved through. And so let's dive into some of the general content for class 4. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about how it really helps move those emotions, because I feel like, especially for girls that are in that space, boys just seem to be really busy, but girls seem to really need that extra piece of just love and connection.
Yeah, well, we do. So just as we go into the curriculum, let's remind ourselves that children awaken now to the environment and to their separateness from the environment. They awaken to pain, to loss, to all of these things that are before grade 3, when they were very young, fairies used to take that away. You know, gnomes used to kiss scraped knees. Now that's not how they experience the world anymore. So we have to be aware of that, and to not withhold the stories in the curriculum. And I know that there's often a question of, well, Norse mythology, you know,
Right.
why?
If you've not read any Norse mythology, you might be thinking, what in the world are we doing this for?
Yes.
Or is my child going to believe in these gods after we're done?
And the most important thing is to remember, we are not bringing it as a religion.
Right.
We're bringing this as an experience that's recorded somewhere in our human evolution of consciousness. We have to also remember that if we are following this Waldorf pedagogical path, we are seeing this whole growing up journey as a path of recapitulating the evolution of our human consciousness. So this is kind of that point in time. And one of my mentors used to say, whenever we teach, we're always teaching past, future, and present all at the same time.
Right.
And we live like that too. So these Norse stories are somewhere in our archetypal experience of evolving. And at this age, if we see and feel, and remember, do some biography work, remember yourself at this age, you will see this dovetailing of this experience. And we provide both the soul nourishment and comfort that it is not just the child experiencing this all alone in the world, separate from the world, and it's only in that child's experience it can feel lonely. These stories help them remember subconsciously, unconsciously in their soul that this is something that is not wrong. It is not wrong to have this little temptation to behave like Loki. It is not wrong, and you're not alone to get so frustrated at injustice that you want to have Thor's hammer. You know, these are the archetypes in our human condition, and these stories help have a mirror for that. They also help us bring imaginative living pictures to children, to live into, to live with. And then we pull on them and we weave in other learning. You know, we weave in the grammar and the past and present and future tense with the 3 Norns sitting at the foot of Yggdrasil tree. And while we are feeling that archetype of that wise woman who can see and weave destiny in these myths, on the wings of that story, we painlessly start to learn grammar. And at the same, without the drills of grammar, at the same time, this picture helps us. And it's not necessarily in a pedantic way that I will draw the 3 Norns and say, this is past, present, future, and do sentences. It's more of, I tell the story, we draw them. Then a few days later, we write sentences and we remember them. It's that stream that helps us really feel through these changes. And if we go back through the 7 core principles of Waldorf education and put them side by side with curriculum, this is where we get the imaginative pictures. This is where we go with developmentally appropriate, from whole to parts, and relationships, and we dovetail all of that together like that.
No, I love it. And it's so beautiful. Parents often ask me, well, what do you use for grammar? And I go, Waldorf? Like there's no separate. There's no separate, you know, in a Waldorf school, there's no extra English teacher. Not, at least not in these grades. Maybe as they're in high school and they're working to write more papers, there might be somebody else there that helps them with that separately. But at this point, we're bringing it in such a beautiful way. It doesn't need to be separate. Because we're bringing it in a way that they're really connecting with it, it sticks. It's in, and it,
if there is a
relationship, you can't know it unless you experience it. It's so amazing.
If there's a relationship and an experience, an inner experience, then there's going to be something to relate to and a reason to remember it. So when we bring in these naming words, and we have named all the different things at the beginning of grade 3, now in grade 4, we are becoming really conscious how they work in sentences, because we need to tell things about the world. And even though we don't lead with the grammar lesson, once we are writing, we have to look at the grammar, and we look at the grammar that's needed. So there are exercises pulled out of the stories, but we don't have 2 separate classes.
No, it's so beautiful the way we bring it together. I mean, that has been one of my greatest joys in all of my years of teaching, is just now I get to do this extra part and it weaves so nicely. You know, it's not just a 4th grade grammar block. It's all of the pieces that are woven together. And so it's just such a beautiful way to bring these subjects to the children.
Yes. And then we expand more, right? Like we don't only do Norse mythology.
Of course.
So local geography and local history is a big part of grade 4, very important part of grade 4. And I found a great inspiration in our Seasons of 7 homeschooling model, because we have gotten to teach each other about the
our spaces, right?
You know, and I love that, seeing that and seeing everybody just kind of go from, this is my room, and we open our hearts and we meet each other as we learn. I think it was beautiful that the whole family was engaged in local history and geography, because you need field trips, you talk to neighbors, you go to libraries, you go to historical parts of your town, you go to these events, and these are such important things to connect to your local place. And out of this place, we build a sense of belonging, we build some orientation to the rest of the world. So that is a very important part of grade 4. We start with local geography, which is very local as your property, your home, your farm, your city. And in our second block, by the end of grade 4, we are presenting on our states, the states we live in, and drawing maps, illustrating them artistically, and not necessarily going through lists of what are the industries, what are the resources, but more of relating to it and seeing how contrast relates, what does it mean to live in Missouri where I live, and to get to the highest point of Missouri. And I will always remember my son being in grade 4 and taking him to our big quest to go on top of the state. And we got there by car and parked our car. It's just to realize where you live, you know, you have to feel it and experience it. And then to learn how to share it with others, how to ask questions, to learn who lived there before you, who planted the orchards, who were the people hunting there, what was happening on the rivers. So that's a big part of grade 4. And grammar is a big part of all of that. You know, writing is a big part of all of that.
I have so many parents that write me after they've done that block, and they're like, I learned things about my state that I never knew.
Yes.
And maybe they grew up there. And, you know, I remember doing history as a child. It wasn't in grade 4. I remember being bored to tears, because when I did it, I was older and I was like, okay, I need something else now. But this meets that fresh explorer. They're not total explorers until they're in 7th, but they start because they've gotten over that Rubicon. They're out of that 9-year change for the most part, or at least getting through it. They're ready for the more. They're ready, and they learn things about their area that they wouldn't have known.
Yes.
Often been paying
and
much
let's section math in this curriculum and fractions, because grade 4, we talked about who is the child in grade 4 and how they look outside in the world, they see parts. They see themselves as a part. So our goal in grade 4 is not to master fractions necessarily. We need to build a relationship to fractions. We need to really understand what is a fraction and what does it mean. I love, my favorite moment of grade 4 in math is when we start to multiply and divide fractions. And the surprise and the awe and the spark in child's eyes when they say, well, now when I multiply, I make smaller things. And when I divide, I make bigger things. Like, this is upside down. And what is happening So these are the moments we look for, and just basic skills in using fractions. In grade 5, we bring them more to mastery before decimals.
Right.
But unless we build a strong foundation so deep in relationship to what is a fraction, then we can't go anywhere.
I agree. And I do think that a lot of people like go whole hog, head on, and think, oh no, I have to do all of this. No, you don't. You really have to give it space. I remember years ago when I was with my oldest son, and it was actually long division he was struggling with, but I was trying to bring it too early. And I had a teacher say, could you just stop for 2 months? Just stop for 2 months. We stopped for 2 months, and then he picked it up like that. It was that space of needing the time in between, which is the beautiful thing about the way we teach in blocks, that we really can give them, not only the space that they need, but we can also, if we have a child that's a little bit younger or a child that's a little bit older, we can arrange those blocks generally to put them where the child needs them when we're homeschooling. And it really lands so beautifully. Let's talk briefly about man and animal, and then we're going to dive into our longer portion, because I want to ask you some juicy questions there. So what would a parent that's coming to Waldorf, or maybe they've been in Waldorf and now they're at the spot, like I get the most questions about grade 1, teaching a child to read. Grade 3, do I have to teach Old Testament stories? In grade 4, what is this man and animal thing? Can't I just make it zoology? So what would you tell a parent that's like, I don't understand?
Okay. The first thing I would say, we are not on a quest to create zoologists. Just like in grade 5, we are not on a quest to create botanists.
No, right.
So where we are within this block is the relationship of the human being to the animal kingdom and to the environment. And that is how we start. We start with the gesture of the human being, the head, the trunk, our limbs. How are we where we are? And what are the gestures and experiences? We feel ourselves in space and in place where we are, how we move. Then we look out. Then we look at the animal like an octopus and a cuttlefish, and we relate to them, and we see how their head without the trunk, and it limits them. How we try to feel a relationship to the world as we enter into that animal's experience. Then we go and look at a squirrel and a mouse, and there's so much of the trunk animal. We look at huge seals and elephants, and what is the experience there? And we move and we go around our spaces, feeling our space, rolling on the floor, and just experiencing that. Then we go and look at hoofed animals and at cats, and just what is the difference on that hoofed animal leg, and where is their knee? Where's our knee? We relate ourselves to the animal kingdom. In building of this relationship, not only do we learn about animal kingdom, we learn about ourselves. We also open a big gate for compassion, for feeling the responsibility and the connection to the animal kingdom.
I agree.
This is our aim. And then in our second block, we go more into the landscapes, the habitats.
Right.
What do they need to survive? How do they adapt and specialize? But not until we have this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't.
Otherwise it's distanced. If you don't have that relationship, you already have the children that are already going to have empathy, but those ones that really need it, they need to build that space. They need to build that space with the animals, and to really be able to understand that piece before you go into where does it live? What does it eat? All of those pieces. So yes, I completely agree.
Yeah. Eating like a bird. And I loved doing that with every time I did this for fourth grade, either homeschool or at school. Just that is a special moment of experiencing what would it be like if I had no arms and I had to eat like a bird, and just getting some pumpkin seeds in front of yourself and feeling silly, but also experiencing this and building the relationship. So that's the key. And in the process, we learn these important academically marked and measured things. but they are a result. They're not the how.
Right. No, I agree. I agree 100%. I think that there's so many beautiful pieces in class 4 and so many beautiful ways that we can bring this to our children. I think as a parent, if I could get others to make sure that they understand, don't overthink it, just have a good time. Don't try to make a little zoologist. Of course, you're going to have some children that are already going to go that direction. They're already going to go that far. But you're not going to push them. You're just going to let them, oh, you want to do that today? Well, here's all the books you need. I'm not going to create a main lesson on it. I think that's it can be a really big mistake's not the right word. And waste of time isn't either, but it can be tricky. If you try to make everything into a lesson, then either nothing's a lesson or they're going to get tired. So I really love that space because here they are with this new capacity. They want to research more. They want to understand more. And now we're at the time where it's okay for them to be a little bit awake. It's not, we're not trying to hold them back anymore. So at least not completely. Well, Daniela, thank you so much for joining me for class 4. And we're going to close up this free portion. But if you want to hear more interesting and amazing information, hop over to our Patreon where we will pick up this conversation and talk more about class 4. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Find our Patreon at Ariel's Light. So Ariel's Light, if you haven't heard already, is the ministry that we started this year. Interfaith, so we welcome people of all faiths to come and experience and converse and really get to know this conscious parenting space. I see it as a space for people that might be deeply into their religion, like being able to go deeper in what that parent-child relationship means. And then people that are just trying to figure out, like, what does this inner work journey mean to me? You're in that space, and I've been there. You're trying to figure out, well, how do I bring what's welling up inside me to my children so that they aren't lost in confusion, so that they actually have this piece of goodness and beauty that Steiner always talks about. So the ministry has roots of anthroposophy, and we will be talking about things from an anthroposophical standpoint, but also really bringing you good content that you can bring into your life